Hi, Dr. John. We are so excited to have you on our podcast today. We first heard about you on Ben Greenfield's podcast. And then once I listened to that episode, I was like, I need to hear more. So then I went and listened to Melissa Ambrosini's episode and a few others. And I just was like, we need to have him on our show. You talk about so many interesting topics and things that we haven't really discussed on this podcast and things that we want to introduce to our listeners. And I know you're the author of multiple books, and you also have a regenerative medicine clinic in Sarasota, Florida as well. And we're just so happy to have you here today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Marnie. I'm excited to dive into some really interesting things that maybe people haven't been familiar with.
And before we get started, one thing we love to ask our guests is what is your non negotiable to start each day?
Mm, boy, I have found going to the beach every morning. So I go to the beach twice, typically in the morning. Once with my dog, and it's usually it's very dark because they don't allow dogs on Siesta Key Beach. So I take her usually at like 4:30, 5:30 in the morning, and she runs along next to me with my bike. But then I've got to get back and get my feet in the sand to ground. And I noticed that it just really it helps me with just my general energy, and also I feel like my parasympathetic nervous system is a little bit more able to handle stress. And so I often go when the sun's coming up. So I'm checking a lot of boxes. I'm grounding, I'm watching the sun come up. So I'm activating my circadian rhythm, which is really going to help me sleep that night quite a bit. And then I stretch and I do yoga, and then I do breath work on the beach. And I can usually do all of that within about a 30 to 45 minute. And so I try to do that every morning. And I would like to say that's my non-negotiable, but sometimes I negotiate myself out of it. But like the last 2 days, I haven't gone because I've been working on a new book that I'm excited about on photobiomodulation and light therapy.
Okay, well, one, that practice, even if you only do it 50% of the time, sounds amazing. And like you've have it stacked so many things. Um, Marnie and I are both in Minnesota, so it's like a dream to be able to wake up and ground and put your
Oh,
feet in the sand.
I mean, by the ocean, I'm
I
listening to, I'm
know.
like, that's vacation. Like,
Right,
that's your
right.
life.
Well, we have goals, Marnie. We can have these aspirations for after we leave, we maybe don't live in Minnesota full time at least. So many important things. And what I love about that is that everything you said is accessible. Maybe not the beach, but getting outside and getting the natural sunlight and moving your body is accessible to everyone. So,
Well, if I was in Minnesota, what I would do is I would set up some like red light, possibly looking at like sauna space. They have some really good kind of
mhm.
incandescent lights where that there's a lot of near infrared, because that's what you're getting from the sun that's really able to um, power up your mitochondria. But there's so much in the full spectrum of sun that you can't get with vitamin D regulation with some of the lower um, frequencies of light. But if you get like in your basement and you're barefoot on the floor, like the concrete, especially if your feet are a little bit wet, like you could
Yeah.
even use a little bit of oil,
Hmm.
you're going to get a good grounding effect. So
Hmm.
maybe setting up something where you're able to like get on something that's connected to the earth. There's even like grounding mats where you can
Hmm.
set it up and you can run a cord up into a second and third level. There's grounding sheets that you can get that can really help. And then of course breath work. My favorite way to do it is through the Wim Hof app. And I
Mhm.
find that, having that, that guided, it's like all you have to do is just open the app and get to the point where you press start, and then you're committed, right?
Yeah.
And I like to do three
Hmm.
or four series of that where I do 40 breaths. And so if anybody is getting really kind of interested in this and it's something that they think that they want to like kind of explore, I actually have a number of my breathwork sessions where I'm doing breath work with some really cool people. Like I did one with Marla Maples not too long ago.
Wow.
Used to be married to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Anybody know who that is? Garrett McNamara, the star of HBO's 100-Foot Wave. I've done one with Ben Greenfield, Luke Story. And we've done it on the beach together where it's guided. So but it's all free videos in where it's a club called Mitozen. It's mitozen.club. And this is also where we have a lot of the products that I know that you guys have been using and been excited about, and we might be talking about some of them. It's a $10 lifetime membership fee. And I know that you're going to have like a coupon for people to be able to kind of get some discounts. But we have what's called we call it the Mitobrary. And because it's a club-based kind of paradigm, it allows me to educate people on using protocols and doing things that you could not normally do in like kind of like your standard supplement company type of scenario, because they really get kind of nitty gritty on claims and things like that. So we're able to do that. And there's a lot of really good content. So
for $10, you get a lifetime membership and you get all those meditations.
well, they're breathwork sessions, and the meditation comes
breath work
afterwards.
sessions.
Yeah.
So I know we dove right in here based on your wonderful morning that you have, but can we back up just a little bit? And everyone has a story, and we would love for you to share yours in a nutshell of your personal journey, how you got into healthcare technology that specifically focuses on mitochondrial health. And then ultimately you have a company and a facility in Sarasota. If you can just share a little bit of that with us.
Well, I think my desire to like build things and develop things and like the creativity involved. I mean, there's a painting behind me. This is one of my I painted this actually. So
Oh, wow.
when oh gosh, where do I start? As a kid, I was one of those kids that was basically taking apart the vacuum cleaner and then trying to put it back together, right? It was always really, really super ultra curious. And I had a lot of health issues as a child. And so I was I began channeling a lot of my creativity and kind of engineering and like abilities towards helping myself feel better. And I was one of the victims from the Camp Lejeune. If you're watching TV, you see a lot of these commercials coming up with attorneys trying to get people that lived on Camp Lejeune between these certain dates. And so I was in utero, and also my first 2 years of life was on Camp Lejeune. My dad has cancer. My sister has major health issues. My mother has major health issues. And then I had a lot of hospitalized much as a child with asthma, a lot of allergies, and I was in special education classes with hyperactivity, ADHD, ADD. And this was in Hawaii, actually, when, Hawaii doesn't have like any middle ground. You're either like in the extreme or you're in the normal classes. And so this was something I had to get through 4 years of being in like this extreme class, and what that did for my self-esteem was pretty challenging. But what I found is that when I look back on that, it was my pain to purpose, because you're not going to tell me that I'm stupid. Like, I'm going to show you. This was the response for me. Like, no. Like, let me show the world like how smart I really am. Right. And I feel like I've kind of gotten over that to some degree, like working to prove myself, as much as it's just for the pure enjoyment of it and seeing what that's doing for people all over the world with a lot of the formulas that we've been able to develop, and not just the formula, but the ways to use it. And I think that that's really what's missing in the industry of like supplements and healthcare and wellness, is that you have a lot of corporations that are, and this is another thing. I mean, we hear about BlackRock buying up all of the houses, right? Well, people aren't aware that BlackRock is buying up all of the supplement companies. And so a lot of your brands that were mom and pop brands are now owned by corporations. And so they're not using the same pure raw ingredients. And so companies like us, that are, really artsy and really interested in providing the best and the finest, are becoming more rare. So there was a point in my career that I thought that I made the wrong decision. I went into healthcare where I should have gone into art. So I literally stopped practicing medicine and went into painting and art full time for a couple of years. And I found that that was very difficult for me because I tend to be a little bit of an introvert anyway. And I found myself at home painting all day. And then I was becoming very lonely, and it kind of was weighing on my my mood. And so then when I made the choice to go back in, I never looked back. And so, but this aspect of creativity has been a real blessing for me. And the other thing that's been a real blessing for me is to stay in the trenches as a clinician. And I feel like this is a big missing link, because you look at a lot of the people that are on podcasts, a lot of the people that are really looked at as like the experts in health and wellness, but they're not practicing. They're not really in the trenches. And if they are, they may not really truly be using natural medicine. And so I have a bit of a unique advantage, because not only am I in the trenches working with patients every day full time, but I also have the ability to kind of use both the creative and the scientific aspect of my brain. And so it comes easy for me to kind of put these things together, like figuring out how to travel, right? Like, this is one thing that I'm really proud of. Like, how can you travel and like solve a lot of the problems related to travel and feel great? And so then you start using different products and different formulas in these different settings. And so there's a lot of examples of that. We're developing a treatment for a stem cell treatment and light therapy for the inner ear for hearing loss here at our clinic.
Wow.
We've got a protocol where we're injecting the prostate with natural antimicrobial substances along with light therapy. And we're seeing patients with benign prostatic hypertrophy all the way to more extreme conditions with their prostate, having this clear up, where we're injecting this under ultrasound, doing a series of that. And I feel like this is going to be something extremely disruptive in a very positive sense to a very unmet need. And I know most of your listeners are females, and one thing to consider is that if your partner has a chronic infection in their prostate, that they could be giving that to you. So if you're having recurrent UTIs and you don't know why, then we may have to do a semen test on your partner. It's a very simple semen test. What we can do at the end of this is we can provide a link where people can actually link to going and actually doing this semen test, and then actually getting a consultation with one of our healthcare providers to kind of go through it. But I have found almost 100% of the time that men over the age of 40 are carrying, it's not a matter of if, it's how many microbes are you holding in that prostate. And then the opportunity that could be cross-pollinating into your partner is very high.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. I'm like overwhelmed by everything you're saying. And I'd love to back up a little bit and talk about mitochondrial health, because I'm not sure our listeners totally understand that. And if you can explain the importance of mitochondrial health before we kind of dive into some of these specific therapies.
What a great pause, and what a great, thing to kind of like circle back on, because at the core of my personal philosophy, and I think a philosophy that needs to be taken from anybody that's really looking to truly have health and not continue to just chase symptoms, which is what our medical paradigm is really based on, because it's based on molecules that go through FDA approval for very specific indications. That's where the money's at, right? So natural substances tend to be more, I'd say cure. I'm not supposed to use the word curative, but they tend to be more treating the root cause. And so what does that mean, treating the root cause? Treating the root cause is basically looking at any health condition and saying that if we appreciate the fact that the body is a self-healing, self-regulating device, that we have the power and the ability to overcome any illness given the right circumstance, and that circumstance is that we have enough energy. And so oftentimes it's a deficit of energy in the body, and that energy comes from our ability to take oxygen and glucose and turn it into something called ATP. And you can think about ATP kind of being like gasoline, to the car. And so this ATP is made within the mitochondria when the cell is healthy and there's not too much stress. The problem is, though, that this mitochondria shuts off and they can only handle a certain amount of stress before it shuts down. And the stress is always in the form of one thing, because all stresses have one thing in common, that's inflammation. So whether it's a sunburn or it's an infection or toxicity or trauma, we have an infection, an inflammation, which is the response. And the inflammation carries a chemistry behind it, which is called cytokines. And so these cytokines have a negative impact on the mitochondria when they reach a certain level. And this is when we really run into trouble, is when that energy shuts down. So we think about our ability to be resilient, our ability to adapt, right? So there's an adaptation response to all stresses. And that adaptation response needs energy. And we only have so much energy, and we have a ceiling, and they call this hormesis, right? And this is a whole nother conversation that we could get into if you want, or we could just leave it at where we're at. But I think the takeaway is that we have to really look at what might be causing us to lose our life force or our energy, and improving that life force and providing the body with that opportunity to heal on its own.
That was such a great explanation. And I mean, you're right. Most of us are walking around chronically stressed and with inflammation. So, I mean, just a great explanation overall. And I think you said it well, that just the amount of inflammation that most of us are dealing with, whether we have the physical symptoms or not, and the stress. And I guess if you just think about it, if for those of us that are dealing with chronic inflammation and are stressed out, that's a direct relation or direct correlation with the health of our mitochondria. So, you had said, obviously the ATP is our energy, it's our gas, but a lot of us are feeling exhausted and depleted. And so it all goes back to the health of our mitochondria. And we'd love for you to kind of dive in and talk just about some of the therapies that you're doing to improve the mitochondrial health. And, I specifically want you to, at some point in this conversation, obviously talk about Methylene Blue, which was, one of the things that drew us to you. And it's just fascinating. So we would love for you to get into that and explain it and what you're doing in your clinic.
Yeah, well, my two most the two substances I'm most drawn to and I find most fascinating are melatonin and methylene blue. And I've written books that are just fully dedicated to each of those molecules. The book Melatonin Miracle Molecule really takes a deep dive. It's the biggest book I've ever written, and it's highly referenced. And really the whole narrative behind melatonin is really mitochondria. And that's why they've shown melatonin to be beneficial to autoimmune disease, liver disease, heart disease, neurological conditions, infections, toxicity. Melatonin can like clear heavy metals out of the brain, cancers, gut issues. The lining of your gut produces 400 times more melatonin than your pineal, and it stimulates microbiome swarming. So anybody interested in having a strong, powerful microbiome, you might be missing like one of the best hacks, which is taking melatonin. Now, I am a big proponent to taking high doses of melatonin. And so anybody interested in kind of diving more into that, I think, the book, I've done a lot of interviews. We could even maybe do a follow-up interview where we really dive deeper into melatonin. But you would ask me about methylene blue and methylene.
Can I ask you a quick question before on melatonin? Because we do want to ask you about that as well before you dive into methylene blue. So when you mention high doses of melatonin, what would be considered a high dose?
Doses within the hundreds of milligrams.
Okay.
Most healthcare providers, I think, in the media kind of portrays melatonin as it might be dangerous to take more than 5 or 10 milligrams.
Yeah.
And that couldn't be farther from the truth. Melatonin is not toxic at all, and there's no negative feedback loop. So this idea that we're going to shut down our own production is nonsense.
Yeah, where did that come from? Because until I started
Yeah,
following you, that's what I believed. And so I take it on rare occasions, and it's only
like,
5
yeah,
milligrams.
I take 5 milligrams if I'm traveling internationally for sleep. And that's like all I thought it wasn't safe because like I had heard it messes with your natural productions of melatonin, and you hear, you know, kids are addicted to it and all this stuff. And so I was just, yeah, really surprised when I
Well,
saw
what's interesting about kids is they produce a lot of melatonin. You know, it really starts to drop off as you get older. And so, you know, kids are fine. You can give kids melatonin, but you generally shouldn't need to give kids melatonin. You know, that's where I think more of the concern is like, why are they having to take it? Now, there's some disease processes where I'm a big proponent to give my patients who are children high doses of melatonin to deal with certain things like autism, you know, autoimmune disease, cancers, you know, different types of neurological conditions. I think it's probably one of the best approaches and safest approaches for these kids. How did this, you know, there might be conspiracy theories. There's flawed studies. Like I know, or there's flawed views on certain studies. I say would say more like Huberman, Andrew Huberman is a huge naysayer to melatonin, and his main reason for that is a hamster study, and his biggest concern is that it would change the our sex hormones and possibly delay puberty with children, right? And so these Siberian hamsters, what they did the study on, they have breeding cycles, and it's tied to the seasons, right? And so when you have longer days, there's more melatonin because melatonin's stored based on light going into our eyes. And this is the same thing with mammals, right? So if you have a longer day, you're going to have more melatonin that's going to be stored in the pineal, and then more melatonin that's going to be dumped when there's complete darkness. And that's kind of the way it works. And then you have shorter days, there's going to be less melatonin. And so the melatonin, the hamsters are going to be a lot more active during the winter months, sexually reproducing. And so this is kind of hardwired, but humans don't have this mechanism at all. It's not even a concern. And they've been multiple human studies on hormones. And in fact, it's quite the opposite, that it can be very supportive to our sex hormones as humans. So there's a number of things like that. Peter Attia's kind of got some weird views on it, as if like there should be no more than the amount that the pineal produces, but it's kind of ignoring, you know, I mean, just like the gut, 400 times more melatonin is produced in the gut. So you start to get to these really large numbers. When you look, every cell in the body produces melatonin, and it's the primary substance that buffers us from stress. So because when you have inflammation and the cell and the mitochondria wants to shut off, then it's melatonin that jumps in there and holds the fort together for a little bit longer, right? And then there's a point where even melatonin can't hold it together, right? But if you give supplement melatonin, that holding together, that ceiling of stress resilience actually raises. And that's one of the reasons I absolutely love taking it when I travel, because, man, when you travel, you just get depleted, right? And sometimes I get depleted just with all the things I'm doing in a day-to-day basis. And so thank God I've got melatonin on board to deal with that.
So how much do you take in a day? Can I ask?
Oh, I take anywhere from 200 to 400 milligrams.
And I'm assuming you're taking this in the evening because it makes you tired, right?
Yeah, I have taken it during the day. I would say about 80% of the population can tolerate taking melatonin during the day and not get sleepy.
Wow.
And sometimes that actually is something that can be really beneficial if individuals are dealing with different types of diseases and we want to get melatonin in them. So there's also some rare situations where people have a paradoxical effect where they get energized when they take exogenous melatonin. And so this would be a situation where if somebody wanted to have the benefits of melatonin and have that extra stress resilience, then they might think about dosing it during the day.
So interesting.
So interesting. I'm definitely going to start experimenting with some melatonin though.
Yeah, me too. And I want to read your book. So that's on my
Now,
list.
one thing to consider, and we can kind of have the same conversation about methylene blue, is what do you want to have in your medicine cabinet when you get sick or you get an infection,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that's a
Let's
great
say,
topic.
let's say, COVID, or we have another strain or something where we really need to have some big guns.
Yep.
Melatonin has shown to prevent the spread of COVID by 54%. And when you look at melatonin's ability to cool down the cytokine storm, then it makes an ideal nutrient to take when someone's sick, because it helps the immune system stay engaged longer before they shut down. Because this whole conversation about mitochondria, you can look at for all organs and all cells in the body, including the immune cells. And the immune cells require energy in order to go and do their job and to kill those different invaders. And when they run out of mitochondria strength, then all of a sudden now you're vulnerable, right? And so a weak immune system is tied to a weak mitochondria. So the more you can handle inflammation, the more you can handle that infection really starting to take hold before things shut down, the more likely you are to survive that illness. And that's why methylene blue has the potential to possibly be of benefit within all of those, in addition to being a very powerful mitochondrial boost. So for those people that are maybe just looking for an energy boost, something that they can improve their memory, concentration, it really helps elevate mood. They've done large clinical trials on depression, and the results have been really, really positive. But for an infection, methylene blue, they call it the magic bullet. And that's the reason my book is called Magic Bullet, because it was originally discovered that it was a cure for malaria back in the late 1800s. And in fact, our blood banks use methylene blue to sterilize our blood. So if you give blood, or if you've gotten blood, you've gotten a little bit of methylene blue. What they do is they combine that methylene blue with light, right? And I mentioned earlier about my interest and my love of photobiomodulation, which is using light therapy to basically heal the body and to support the body's energy, mitochondria, because the mitochondria can use both matter and non-matter to make energy. So we can actually use something that is not even a matter. So this is photons. Photons is just a unit of energy. And that's what, is basically contained in light, is packets of these energies called photons. So our mitochondria can use an electron or a photon to make energy. And what's really interesting is the photon that penetrates the body the most happens to be the exact photon that methylene blue can absorb and push into this mitochondrial chain of energy. And so you get a really nice boost. And it's also very nice as an antimicrobial effect. We do an IV here at the clinic where we do intravenous methylene blue, and then we actually have a laser that we can place into the vein. And as the blood, every few minutes, the blood circulates through our entire body. And so you're able to radiate. We usually keep that in for about an hour. So the blood is getting exposed to this light frequency and absorbing all this methylene blue. And we see some real positive improvements on chronic infections with this protocol.
Can we back up a minute and talk about what is methylene blue?
Sure. Methylene blue is a brilliant blue salt, and it is a synthetic molecule. And out of the hundreds of thousands of synthetic molecules ever discovered, there's never been anything that they found that works so powerfully in the body. And it works as an antimicrobial for a very wide variety of microbes. We actually were talking about prostate, and this is one of the things that we're doing here that's really so groundbreaking, is that we're doing an ultrasound guided injection right into the prostate gland under ultrasound, right? And so we're using something called ozone gas, which is very antimicrobial. And what's great about these substances is that they have a very powerful broad spectrum effect on virtually all microbes, but they leave the tissues unharmed, unlike antibiotics obliterate our natural flora. So ultimately, it may get rid of or dampen down an infection. It's going to leave the body weaker. And so oftentimes these infections come back and then the body's weaker and it's a net negative long term, right? And that's why methylene blue is considered the magic bullet, because it has these benefits to the body, but leaves the body unharmed. When you take methylene blue orally, it absorbs very well orally. You really want to take it either in like what we make it, it's called Lumitol Blue is the product that we have, and it's a bar and it's a cocoa butter suspension. And we combine it with a number of other polyphenols that also have the ability to use light beneficially. And it dissolves almost completely in the stomach. And that's where most of the absorption is really very well done in the body. Or you can get drops. You need to be careful because there can be a lot of heavy metals in methylene blue if it's not a really pure source. So we test our methylene blue very rigorously to make sure that it's not tainted with any heavy metals. You will pee blue for a while, so get ready.
Is that a good sign or a bad sign when you said for a while? Like, do you want to pee blue or?
Yeah, if you're not peeing blue, then that might mean that you've got a lot of vitamin C you might be taking either food with vitamin C, or if you're supplementing with vitamin C, because vitamin C converts methylene blue to something called leukomethylene blue. And so you won't see the discoloration so much in your urine, but most people, the urine is very blue. And if you're having chronic urinary tract infections, it was actually an approved drug for chronic UTIs. And because it concentrates in your urine and it's antimicrobial, it's a fantastic, and you can take it every day. It's almost, to me, I think it's malpractice that, you have these urologists that are, and general practitioners giving people with chronic UTIs antibiotics. I mean, can you imagine?
No, this is such good information to have, because I feel like just in a normal course, I mean, Marnie and I are both moms and we just interact with a lot of people and they're constantly taking different medications and antibiotics. And it's just nice to know that there are other options out there. So who should be taking it? Obviously, you mentioned like if you're looking for more energy or just like you're focused on your brain health, but if you don't have any major chronic conditions, who is it for? How often should you be taking it? You kind of said every day. How do you know if it's right for you?
Well, I would say every day, with like every 2 or 3 weeks, taking 2 or 3 days off to just kind of clean it out of your system. Like I'm actually on a break right now for a few days. Um, it's really good for people with any type of neurological situations, like anything from brain fog to Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, degenerative neurologic disease. They've got studies showing that it's got a lot of benefit to kind of clear out beta amyloid plaques. So
And
methylene blue also, it activates autophagy, and that's one of the ways that it kind of clears out some of these protein tangles. It's such a powerful boost to the mitochondria. Depression, if anybody's dealing with depression, really dosage wise, we should probably touch on this. Dosage wise, it's a 0.5 milligram to 4 milligrams per kilogram of body weight is kind of like the spectrum. When you look at depression and you're wanting that a little bit more of a boost, especially if you're like fighting an infection or something, you really want to be more on the higher end of that. And I find kind of rule of thumb, I'd say females, we're usually putting them around 40 to 45 milligrams a day. And males, kind of we double that. But there's, I had a fairly, I think the female was about 115, 120 pounds, and she's really thriving on 90 milligrams a day. And so this was somebody that I just literally saw just before this podcast. And she takes that virtually every day and loves it. So you have to kind of feel out your zone, and then don't be afraid to change it, change it up. There might be a really dialed in dosage for you, but then You might get sick or feel like you're coming down with something, or you might be traveling, or you might have, company in town and you're going to be really busy, and taking a little bit more during a few days might be a benefit. I think the real time when I like to take more is when I'm traveling or if I get sick, which isn't very often, or if I'm around sick people.
So why aren't doctors talking about this? Like, why aren't we hearing about this in the world that much?
Well, there's no patent on it, right? And so the way it works with our medical system here in the United States is that um, the the hospitals, all the medical schools, and a lot of your larger medical practices even are owned by like this BlackRock and some of the large, Wall Street, hedge funds. And so they're all profit driven and they're all tied into big pharma. And so what the doctors are learning in school and what they're subjected to in the journals and their education is all based on what is going to make this machine more money, right? And we've seen that with COVID. I mean, anybody that's has, any sense at all, and they've seen what's happened with COVID is just gotta be woken up here. So we're going to have to go outside of the system for the truth. There's too much censorship. And it could happen again. I mean, it feels like things have kind of loosened up a lot, but I'd say brace yourself. And that's one of the reasons we created the PMA, and we've got content kind of shielded, and we're not really working with the public because I'm a member helping another member, right? Once you sign up and you sign the agreement and join as a member, it's no longer in the public domain. And this is what I think probably there's other people that are going to be following suit on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like anything else with supplements, anything that's not a pharmaceutical or a drug. I mean, we just had a conversation earlier on a different topic, but it kind of along the same lines with our healthcare system. So that could be a whole nother, conversation for a different day.
Mhm.
And you kind of started talking about methylene blue and light and like what that symbiosis does. Can you touch a little bit more on that?
Sure. So it's called photobiomodulation, and you have photodynamic substances, and there's a number of different substances that have a synergy with light. Like curcumin has a very powerful effect with blue light. Um, Same thing with um, um, uh, wormwood, right? Wormwood actually works really well with blue light. You have methylene blue tends to work really well with a 660 nanometer, which is in the red spectrum. And I could continue on. I get into a lot of these substances actually in the book, and it's quite interesting to kind of look at that. But what happens is that the substances with the molecules within these substances have an ability to absorb those lights, and it pulls those lights into the body and has a synergistic effect that amplifies, the benefit.
So with the blue light, though, you hear that blue light's not good for you, but you're saying it pulls blue light into the body, or like, can you explain that or clarify
Oh,
that?
I never said blue light was not good for you. Blue light is fantastic for you. In fact, blue light is extremely antimicrobial. The problem with blue light is it doesn't penetrate the skin. Our skin is designed to protect us from the sun, right? And so most light doesn't get but a millimeter through the skin. And blue light almost completely absorbs into red blood cells, which any blood within the surface of your skin is just going to totally absorb. And so you're not going to see any get it. So because it's not going to penetrate into the body, you're very limited to using blue light for medical purposes, right? But we do use it in our IV, where we can do blue light intravenously, and that works really well. Blue light's also really good in the morning, to help with our circadian rhythm, because during the day there's a lot of blue light, a blue and green light, and that's really beneficial for setting our internal clock for sleep and wake. But ultimately, you know, the blue light is just limited because of its absorption. And that's why the red spectrum, especially in the red and near infrared spectrums, are the most absorbable and they penetrate the deepest. So if you look at like a graph and you see all the different frequencies, you can see that there's like a nice deep penetration of those frequencies when you get into that specific wavelength. So it's all about penetration. I mean, that's the key point with light therapy. And the deeper you go into the body, the more you can affect more tissues, right? You can get down to the bone, the joint, the ligaments. If you can't get down into those areas, you can do it over your liver. You can get some into your liver. We have some really amazing new palm light technology. We don't even have them on our website yet, but it's going to be in the for the club members. We do have an intranasal light that's very, very powerful. And but this palm light, it puts out a tremendous amount of light. And the scientist that developed this is actually, we were just recording some content together before, and I noticed that my camera had turned off. So he's going to be back and we're going to be recording. But he has the patent on cooling these lights. So anybody that might be having like Juve lights or like these red light panels, well, this guy has taken that technology like way beyond. And he's made these different panels, and this palm size light is just incredible to put over your different organs. You can put over your sinuses, you can put over your ears, you can shine it into your mouth, put it over your joints and your muscles. And I've never seen anything do such a great job at really activating healing. And it's set perfectly to methylene blue because we work together to dial it in. So if you take the methylene blue and then you use these different devices, you're really, really locking in this this powerful synergy.
You're really like amplifying the potency or just the effectiveness of the therapy that you're doing. Well, as I'm sitting here on my infrared
I am too.
Yeah.
I'm sitting on my infrared PEMF mat right now.
But I love, and there's so many different things we won't have time to get into all today, but like that to me is fascinating. I honestly think my mother-in-law lives in Sarasota, and I think I'm gonna have to pay a trip. I would love her to come, but I want to come also to your facility because I think she could really benefit. I mean, I know you work with a lot of patients that have autoimmune conditions, which she has, and a lot of pain and different things.
I wish we had time to talk about these new stem cells that we're using here. I'm
Can you give us like a 5-minute summary of that?
Let me give you a 5-minute summary, but I've got to tell you, my internal observer of this, like I'm listening to myself talk, and it almost sounds like not even believable, doesn't it? Like,
right.
Yes. I mean,
like,
I would love
who
to
is this guy? Where did this guy come from? Is he like from some other planet? And like, I've never heard of it, all this stuff. I need to like step out of like this world that I'm in and like kind of look at it from the perspective of what this looks like for other people. And a lot of it does sound unbelievable, but I can tell you this stuff is real. And I believe this is the future of medicine. And we would already be here if it wasn't for the fact that we've let, money overtake our whole medical system. And if you go out of the country, you'll actually find a lot of these things are very, very much used in Germany. I found Germany, even Cuba, Italy, a lot of the protocols I've learned from my German and Italian, colleagues, but, they don't have as much of an shadowing from the pharmaceutical industry. But so stem cell wise, we have found something that is just so incredibly exciting here at Advanced Rejuvenation. We've been involved in regenerative medicine for, over 15 years or more. And we've used a lot of different types of techniques. In fact, we were one of the first clinics to draw bone marrow and do liposuctions using adipose tissue to heal for everything from different arthritis and back pain, and running these things as IVs for people for different types of autoimmune conditions, stroke. We've worked with paraplegic patients and helped and seen some miracles with that. But I can tell you that there's been such a huge leap forward in the last couple of years. And about 9 months ago, we we connected with a scientist that discovered a way to extract stem cells from fat. And he began to take donations from mostly females that are in their young 20s. And he would take their adipose tissue and safely take out the stem cells and also take out something called the endothelial cells, which is what have ACE2 receptors in them. And that's where the spike proteins could be. So basically, he has a way to clear out, because he pre-screens people for whether they've been vaccinated or not. But of course, people can lie, right? So you can't really ensure that. What's interesting is that all of the stem cells that are being used virtually in all the other clinics, unless it's bone marrow, are coming from placental tissue, right? They're coming from cord blood or what's called Wharton's jelly or the amniotic sac. And so there's a tremendous amount of rich stem cells within the placenta. And if you wanted to do an expansion where you regrow these cells, it's called culture expansion. It's illegal to do in the United States, and this is something that's being done regularly in Mexico and Colombia and basically out of the country. And people are flying to these countries and spending tens of thousands of dollars on these IVs of these, typically it's a 2 million cell count IV. What a lot of people are unaware of is that they're not able to filter out these endothelial cells, right? So there's a very high chance that you're getting spike proteins within those treatments. And the other thing is that these stem cells are very fragile. They have very short, what's called telomeres. Basically, they don't last very long. They're lucky to last up to an hour. And that's why these centers will actually do multiple infusions while you're at the center. They may do 2, and sometimes they may do even up to 6 because they need to kind of keep activating things. My colleague, we call these X cells, and they're derived from adipose stem cells, and they have 40 times longer telomeres. And in other words, they last and survive 40 times longer.
Wow.
And in fact, they survive weeks. And he ran a study on ulcerative colitis, and the results were actually quite good. You're not going to really move the needle on an autoimmune disease unless you can have something working over a period of time. And we started utilizing these cells for orthopedic conditions, and we're seeing results like Ben Greenfield, like his knee. He'd gone from, Matt Cook and Harry Adelson, all these people that are considered like the top stem cell doctors. And of course, Luke Story was the same thing. And I had both of them here in December because I did an event, and we had a documentary that was being filmed called Biohack Yourself. And they filmed us actually doing treatment on both of them and a few other people. And I followed up with them over the last few weeks, and both of them are completely pain-free, where they had used, because mostly it was all these placental-based stem cells, right?
So you're able, just so I can understand, in your clinic, you're extracting stem cells from fat and putting them into a person like in their knee or somewhere in the body where there's pain. Like, I'm not that familiar with this, so I'm just trying to understand.
So the scientist has a company, and the company is doing liposuctions and collecting the fat, taking the fat through a very specific patented process, and then he's shipping us these doses that we keep frozen. We keep them in a special cryo preserved, it's below 80 degrees. It's really cold, right? So we're able to pull these, and we get doses up to 2 million, which is a lot, right? And the price point is very reasonable. So what we can do for people to do something that would be, in my opinion, much, much more powerful than what they could get in Panama or Mexico or Colombia with these culture expanded cells. Plus, I believe it's safer. You're able to stay here in the United States. You're able to do these procedures with someone that has experience, where when you go to a lot of these other centers, you're kind of like subjected to these doctors that they have to hire, right? Because it's corporation, right? A lot of these procedures are much better. There's much better success when they're done under high definition ultrasound. And the problem is that this takes years to really perfect. And most doctors that are really proficient at reading and doing needle guidance with ultrasound are not going to be working for someone else. Because if you can do that, you can pretty much like do some real magic within the human body. So these are all things that we have the capacity to do here in Sarasota at our clinic. It's some things that we've been doing for a very long time. And now we're able to do this with a stem cell line that, in my opinion, is very powerful. They're all FDA approved. They've been through rigorous studies, and we're really excited about it. We actually have a whole article that we did on these cells that we can send you, that you can make available to your listeners if you'd like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I just find the future of health, really, not even healthcare, just the future of health. So it's hopeful and optimistic. I mean, it's kind of like when I read Tony Robbins' book, Life Force, because a lot of this, is talked about in there. And what you're doing.
I'm going to go on the record and say that book was somewhat of a joke. It was Tony Robbins' investment in all these things, and it was so biased. And I heard Joe Mercola did an interview with Tony, and Joe Mercola was pointing out a stem cell that Tony didn't have an interest in that was actually really phenomenal. And Tony wouldn't even talk about it. He didn't want the bandwidth to be on anything but what he had an investment in. And I love Tony. I used to do medical crew for Tony Robbins, and I think he's helped me out. And he's amazing. He's also a very shrewd, smart businessman. So anybody reading that book, take it as a grain of salt. He's siphoning everybody to Roarden's clinic in Panama. And again, my opinion, I've got a lot of friends that have gone over there, a lot of people, and they have not gotten the results that they were hoping for.
Well, and I think for me, like I read the book as well, and I think it just opened my mind to, like Stephanie said, the future of medicine. Like I didn't even know that half of those things existed. So I wasn't that interested in like his specific clinics and all of that, but more the higher level ideas that he was putting out into my mind that I wasn't aware of.
I think that's a good positive. It has brought a light to the area of regenerative medicine that wouldn't otherwise have been. I would like to invite you guys to come in. What we do with this infusion with the X cells, which I personally have done myself and noticed just a tremendous boost in my just waking up in the morning and just feeling amazing and my joints feeling better. Is we do a methylene blue IV, and then we run something called mannitol. And mannitol is a sugar, and it breaks down the blood-brain barrier temporarily. And so then we run these X cells as an IV, and we're able to get a good amount of these into the brain. And this is really where we get the good feelings. Like if we can have a strong, powerful regenerative effect in the nervous system, that's where we really notice a lot of the differences. So I would love to have you guys come in and experience this, and we could even record maybe a podcast and take more of a deeper dive into this subject.
Well, that would be amazing.
Yeah, maybe in the fall if we come for our conference.
Yes. Well, and I have my mother-in-law right there. So kill two birds with one stone, right?
I might have to tag along then.
You can tag along. There's plenty of room. And
please.
I really want to get her to come.
We have a couple of apartments associated with the clinic as well. So anybody that's coming in, they're kind of like really nice Ritz-Carlton hotel rooms.
Oh,
and
nice.
So that can be kind of nice for people flying in and out, that they can actually stay right here on premises.
Well, I'm sure you have people from all over the world coming to see you, just given the unique services that you offer. Yeah. And to my knowledge, there isn't anyone local here in Minnesota that's doing it. So
definitely not.
So I know you shared so much, and there's so many different biohacking protocols and things we can be doing. If someone's out there listening, you've just opened up their mind to the possibilities that are out there. But what are one or two things that someone could do to start digging deeper today and start using? What would it be? What one or two tips or strategies would you offer in addition to coming down to your clinic?
Well, we talked about, methylene blue and melatonin. I think those are two really powerful things that people can start doing. Talked about grounding. We talked about sun gazing in the morning. We talked about breath work. We gave some instructions on the club, mitozen.club, and that they can watch some of the breathwork sessions that I've done, or they can use the Wim Hof app. We went over regenerative medicine and some different options there. A lot to chew on. I get that. People might want to re-listen to this.
I love being blown away, and I feel a little blown away right now, as I
Yeah.
did when I listened to you on these other podcasts. So I'm just like, my mind is spinning.
I know.
And
I
I'm
feel like,
excited to try some of this stuff.
and so the methylene blue that you can purchase directly through you, what's the difference between taking that though and coming in and doing an IV treatment? I mean, seems more powerful to do that, but
Well, when you combine it with intravenous laser, right? So
that's,
the reason that you might want to do an IV of methylene blue is to get a really high amount of methylene blue in the blood all at once, and then to activate it so that you're supercharging your blood. And we like to do that prior to the XL infusion, and because you're really powering the mitochondria within those stem cells. When we do these, it's not like, you go to Panama, you're going to spend $25,000 and you're going to get put in this little sterile white room with a chair in it. And you're going to have some nurse hook you up and run an IV, and then that's it. Right. We're taking like a lot. And that's where, like I said, the creativity and the artistic aspect has really come into play. And I think that there's synergies with these various modalities that really make and move the needle to allow them to be much more effective. Because, from what I've experienced from all the people that have flown out to these different centers, it's not really a huge shift, at least long term. One of the things that we really didn't touch on is the real shining light for these placental stem cells is they have the ability to be a very strong anti-inflammatory for a short period of time, maybe a month or two. So people feel better short term. But the regenerative part of these treatments takes time. And so if you're feeling good within a month or two, that has nothing to do with the amount of cartilage that was produced, right? That cartilage takes time. And so that's where they've really looked to compare the placental stem cells to the adipose-derived stem cells, is that in the short term, people might feel a little bit better, but the durability in the long term is just way, way more powerful when you get into these other cells that last longer.
You have given us so much to think about. Like, I know we have to start to wrap up this conversation. But I want you to tell our listeners where they can find you. And I know that you've offered a discount for your, what is it called? The Zen. Mitozen library.
Yeah, the mitozen.club. So mitozen.club, it's a $10 membership, lifetime membership fee, and then you can shop. You can find the Zen meditation mist and high dose melatonin products are called Sandman. Lumitol Blue, which is the methylene blue. There's a lot of things that we have there that might be of interest. And there's videos that you can watch that talk about how you can utilize some of these different products. And I'm on Instagram quite a bit. It's at Dr. John Lieurance. We have drjohnlieurance.com. The clinic website is advancedrejuvenation.us. And then, of course, mitozen.club is the store. So,
and you can use the code Living Well for 5% off.
Perfect.
Yes, in the store. So, Dr. John, one final question that we love asking all of our guests is, what does the art of living well mean to you?
Well, I think it's having some ability to understand the way you're living, how it's serving you at various levels, right? There's mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, chemical, and being able to evaluate like the way that you're operating and the way that you're living to balance all of those together at its maximum, right? But yet at the same time, not spending and stressing too much on anything where you're expending more stress than you're getting the benefit from actually doing that activity.
Very well said.
Yeah, beautifully
Totally
said.
agree.
Yep. Well, thank you. We will definitely be reaching out, paying a visit. and likely wanting to have you come back on and talk about one of the other many topics that you are so well versed on. So thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Have a
Bye-bye.
great day.